Imagine, a beautiful 17-year-old girl moves to a small, rainy town. There she meets an impossibly attractive boy, pale, mysterious, with perfect skin and golden eyes. He saves her life, sings her lullabies, tells her she's his personal son. Sounds like a fairy tale, like every teenager's dream in 2008. Now remove the music, the wealth, and the vampire charm. What's left? A boy who secretly watches her at night, enters her bedroom without asking, reads the thoughts of everyone around her, sabotages her car so she can't leave. Says, "I'm dangerous for you," while refusing to let go, manipulates her emotions, isolates her from friends and family, and controls her every move. If this were an ordinary 17-year-old without the Cullen fortune and the cinematic lighting, it wouldn't be a romantic film. It would be a thriller about an obsessive stalker. Today we're going to look at Twilight exactly that way, without the rose-tinted filter. Why Edward Cullen is one of the most deeply unsettling figures in 2000s pop culture. Why his behavior is a textbook collection of red flags for obsessive, controlling relationships. And why in 2026, we can no longer watch this franchise as a sweet teenage love story. This is a conversation about how we romanticize toxic patterns when they come in a beautiful package, and how important it is to be able to see the red flags, even when they glitter in the sunlight. In 2008, Twilight exploded. 17-year-old Bella Swan moves from sunny Arizona to the small, perpetually gray town of Forks, Washington. There she meets Edward Cullen, pale, perfectly beautiful, mysterious, belonging to a family that keeps to itself. He saves her from being crushed by a van in the school car park. From that moment, a love begins between them that feels eternal. Edward admits he's a vampire. He doesn't drink human blood, but Bella's scent is the most powerful thing he has ever encountered. He fights the urge to kill her and simultaneously cannot stay away. They go to school together, he watches her at night, sings her lullabies, drives her in his Volvo, shows her his world. Then Jacob Black and the wolf pack arrive. Then Bella's pregnancy and breaking dawn. The half-human, half-vampire child Renesmee, war with the Volturi, and Jacob's imprinting on Bella and Edward's newborn daughter. Between 2008 and 2012, this was perceived as the ultimate teenage fantasy. A beautiful, wealthy, eternally young man who would die for you. Dangerous but pure love, forbidden fruit. The vampire boom that followed Interview with the Vampire and Buffy had done its work. True Blood and the Vampire Diaries were airing nearby. Teenage girls wrote fan fiction by the million, bought merchandise, and dreamed, "I want someone to love me that obsessively." Nobody asked questions. Nobody used the words consent, stalking, or grooming. It was simply epic love. But remove the 2008 filter, take away the beautiful soundtrack and Robert Pattinson's face, and a different story remains. A 104-year-old man, an adult in every way that matters, who obsessively pursues a 17-year-old schoolgirl, violates every boundary she has, and gradually strips her of her autonomy. And next to him, a second romantic interest who is also far from harmless. Strip away Robert Pattinson's looks and all the accompanying gloss, and Edward Cullen's behavior in the first film, and throughout the franchise, is a classic profile of an obsessive, controlling partner. Let's go through it. Edward admits to Bella directly. He has been in her room while she slept, watching her, before they are even officially together. He does this repeatedly. He frames it as something he cannot stop himself from doing because her scent is too powerful. This is a significant detail. He describes his surveillance not as a choice he makes, but as something she provokes in him by simply existing. That framing, "Your presence causes my loss of control, therefore my loss of control is about you," is one of the most consistent features of controlling relationships. Edward continuously monitors the thoughts of Bella's friends, classmates, and family. He knows what Mike, Jessica, Angela, and Charlie are thinking, and he uses this information to manage situations around her. When Bella travels to Port Angels with friends, Edward already knows through others' thoughts that she'll be there and follows her. When a group of men harass her in a dark alley, he happens to appear. He later admits, "I was following you. This isn't protection, it's premeditated surveillance." He made a unilateral decision that he had the right to track her movements because she might be in danger. That is the logic stalking always uses. Edward repeatedly tells Bella, "I'm dangerous for you. I could kill you. You should stay away from me," and then immediately adds, "But I can't be without you." This push-pull dynamic is one of the most effective tools of controlling relationships. First, he makes her afraid, then he pulls her back in. Bella ends up feeling simultaneously threatened and responsible for saving him. The emotional weight of both, fear and guilt, is placed on her. In the first film, Edward uses his strength to protect Bella from the van, which reads as heroic. But as the franchise develops, particularly in Eclipse, he repeatedly blocks her movements, insisting she not visit Jacob, intervening in her plans, creating the steady impression that she cannot freely choose where she goes and who she sees. This is coercive control, limiting someone's mobility, framed as protection. And it is consistently delivered with visible suffering on his part, which intensifies Bella's sense of guilt. As the relationship develops, Bella gradually withdraws from her earlier life. Less time with friends, less time with her father, her world narrowing to the Cullens. In New Moon, Edward leaves, and she falls into a severe depression. When he returns, she forgives everything without any discussion of the pain he caused. No accountability, no conversation. Just the return of the relationship, as if nothing happened. The cycle repeats, and with each repetition it becomes harder to name what's wrong, because the good moments are so overwhelming. If Edward were an ordinary teenage boy without supernatural abilities and the Cullen wealth, there would already be a file on him. The only thing that makes his behavior read as romance is the packaging it comes in. Bella is a 17-year-old girl who ends up facing decisions of enormous consequence with no reliable adult support, no neutral source of information, and no one in her life whose advice isn't shaped by their own stake in the outcome. What happens to her is not primarily a failure of her character. It is a failure of every structure that should have been around her. Before we look at what Bella does, it's worth looking at what surrounds her, or rather, what doesn't. Her mother, Renee, is warm and loving at a distance. They speak on the phone. But Renee has a new husband, a new life, and is geographically far away. The relationship is present but thin, not the kind where a daughter calls in a crisis and expects to be truly held. Her father, Charlie, is a good man who genuinely cares, but he and Bella are essentially strangers learning to live together. He doesn't know how to reach her. She doesn't know how to reach him. They share a house and careful politeness, and not much else. The result is that Bella has no significant adult in her life, no one whose judgment she trusts, no one she can bring a real problem to, no one who knows her well enough to notice when something is wrong. This is not a small thing. It is the foundational condition of everything that follows. Then she discovers that vampires and werewolves exist, and that both communities are, by necessity, hidden from the world. This knowledge cannot be taken to her parents. It cannot be taken to a school counselor, a doctor, a friend outside the circle. The moment Bella enters this world, she enters it alone. Every adult who knows the truth is already a member of one of the two groups with a direct interest in what she decides. The Cullens want her to stay close to Edward, eventually to become one of them. The wolf pack's interest runs in the opposite direction. No one in her life who understands what is actually happening is in a position to give her advice that puts her needs first. She is 17. Her brain is still developing. The capacity for long-term risk assessment, for recognizing manipulation, for weighing the difference between what feels true and what is true. None of this is fully formed yet. Her self-esteem is low. She has no template for what healthy love looks like. And she is surrounded by people, some of whom are over 100 years old, who are, each in their own way, steering her toward a particular outcome. It would be easier, in some ways, to say that Bella made her choices. And technically she did. But a choice made in conditions of isolation, informational asymmetry, emotional vulnerability, and the complete absence of disinterested guidance is not the same as a free choice. She is making decisions she was never equipped to make, without the support that would have made it possible to make them differently, surrounded by parties who all have something to gain. The most troubling detail is this: every adult in Bella's life who actually understands her situation is invested in a particular outcome. The Cullens love her and want her in their world. The pack is loyal to Jacob and wants her out of the Cullens' reach. Even the information she receives may be partial, shaded, or simply wrong in ways she has no way to verify. She cannot fact-check what she's being told. She has no outside reference point. She is navigating genuinely dangerous territory, with genuinely high stakes, using only what people with competing interests choose to tell her. This is not a story about a girl who fell for a bad boy because she was foolish or complicit. It is a story about what happens when a vulnerable young person is left without the adult support she needed, and finds herself in a world where everyone who knows the truth wants something from her. From the moment Bella arrives in Forks, she operates from a position of feeling like she doesn't belong, isn't interesting, isn't special. When Edward begins to notice her, saves her, watches her, tells her she is unlike anyone else, it is the first time someone has made her feel chosen. She idealizes him almost immediately. This is a recognizable pattern. A person with low self-esteem encounters someone who makes them feel exceptional and loses critical perspective in the process. The feeling of being seen overrides the ability to see clearly. And with no adult to reflect this back to her, no outside voice to offer a different perspective, there is nothing to interrupt the slide. Edward tells her, "I'm dangerous, I want to kill you, I watch you while you sleep." Bella hears this and stays. Not because she is blind or foolish, but because she has no framework for what she's seeing. Nobody in her life has taught her what controlling behavior looks like. Nobody around her who knows the full picture is going to name it as a problem. The Cullens accept Edward's behavior as normal. The wolf pack is focused on their own agenda. And Bella, at 17, with low self-esteem and no neutral adult to turn to, does what most people do in that situation. She finds ways to make sense of what's happening that allow her to stay. She is not rationalizing out of weakness. She is doing the best she can with the tools she has, which are severely limited by her age, her isolation, and the absence of anyone genuinely in her corner. In New Moon, after Edward leaves, Bella doesn't simply experience heartbreak. She screams at night, hears his voice as hallucinations, takes physical risks specifically to hear it again. Her sense of herself has become so entangled with his presence that his absence is physically destabilizing. When he returns, she forgives everything without discussion, not because she doesn't feel the pain, but because she has no language for naming what happened and no support structure for processing it differently. The relationship simply resumes. By eclipse and breaking dawn, she has cut herself off almost entirely from normal life. Fewer friends, distance from her father, plans for college abandoned, intent to become a vampire at 18. She frames this as choosing love. But it is the erasure of her own identity in order to fit into someone else's world, carried out not under obvious force, but under the accumulated weight of a relationship that has gradually made her needs feel less important than his, inside a life that gave her nothing solid to hold onto instead. The franchise gives Bella two romantic options and frames this as a choice between two great loves. But both Edward and Jacob demonstrate serious red flags, just of different kinds. The franchise romanticizes them both. In 2026, both read as examples of what unhealthy relationships can look like in adolescence. Edward is the classic ice prince, externally perfect, internally obsessed. His toxicity operates through total control and boundary violation. He monitors, follows, enters without permission, restricts movement, says I'm dangerous, while refusing to let go. He manipulates through fear and guilt, creating the impression that Bella cannot survive without him. His love is a dependency. She becomes the center of his existence, but in the process loses her own autonomy. In real life, this pattern has a name. The franchise calls it passion. Jacob starts as the warm, friendly option, open, supportive, the safe harbor after Edward's intensity. But as the franchise develops, his behavior becomes increasingly problematic. He pressures Bella emotionally. In Eclipse, he kisses her without her consent, and the film doesn't treat this as a violation. He uses emotional leverage. I won't survive if you choose him. He makes his pain her responsibility. And then there is imprinting on Renesmee, Bella and Edward's newborn daughter. The franchise presents this as fate, as something beautiful and inevitable. A mechanism that cannot be controlled, that simply happens, that the pack accepts as natural law. In 2026, it reads as one of the most disturbing elements in the entire series. An adult man, psychically bonding to a newborn, with the understanding that this bond will become romantic when she grows up. The franchise asks us to see this as destiny. What it actually depicts is the total removal of the child's future capacity for autonomous choice, decided at birth, by someone else's biology. Neither Edward nor Jacob asks for consent before entering Bella's personal space, physically or emotionally. The franchise presents their competition for her as proof of how lovable she is. What it actually shows is two people who relate to her autonomy as an obstacle rather than a given. Bella ends up choosing Edward, but both options leave her without genuine freedom. The film calls this a love triangle. It is two different kinds of control, dressed in different clothes. Edward and Jacob don't exist in isolation. Both come from systems, the Cullen family and the wolf pack, that quietly shape how they understand love, control, and consent. And both systems, in very different ways, produce men who don't know how to respect another person's autonomy. From the outside, the Cullens look like the ideal family. Beautiful, wealthy, cohesive, devoted to each other. Carlisle is the gentle patriarch, Esme the warm maternal figure. They have a home, a structure, clear rules. They don't drink human blood. They try to live alongside humans. When Bella first encounters them, they seem stable, safe, even aspirational. And this is precisely the problem. When someone belongs to an obviously functional family, their behavior automatically gets more benefit of the doubt. Bella sees the family Edward comes from, and it makes him seem acceptable. The product of something good. We do this constantly in real life. We use a person's family background as evidence of their character, as though the two were the same thing. But look at what the Cullen family actually models. Carlisle built most of this family by turning people into vampires, choosing them, transforming them, making them part of his world in a way that cannot be undone. The structure is one where the patriarch decides what is best, where the rules are set by one person and followed by everyone, and where this is understood not as control, but as care. Edward grew up inside this model for a century. One person's judgment overrides another's autonomy, and it is called love. It is not a coincidence that Edward relates to Bella the same way. He monitors her, controls her movements, makes decisions about what's safe for her without asking what she wants. He learned this template somewhere. The Cullen family, for all its warmth and beauty, is a system where control exercised from a position of love is completely normalized, invisible precisely because everything else looks so functional. The wolf pack operates on a different but equally troubling logic. At the center of it is imprinting. The franchise presents this as romantic fate. Beautiful, inevitable, transcendent. But look at what imprinting actually does to the people involved. The most revealing story isn't Jacob's, it's Sam's. Sam Uli was with Lee Clearwater before he became a wolf. They were in a relationship. Then imprinting happened, not a choice, not a gradual shift in feelings, but a sudden biological override. Sam imprinted on Emily Young, Lee's cousin, and the relationship with Lee was over, not because Sam stopped caring. Not because something went wrong between them, because his biology made the decision for him. The pack treats this as simply how things are. Imprinting is destiny, something that cannot and should not be questioned. But follow the actual consequences. Lee lost her partner to a mechanism neither of them chose or consented to. She carried that loss through the rest of the franchise, the only female wolf in the pack, watching the man she loved with her cousin every day. The system that produced her situation is never examined. It is simply accepted. And then there is the scar on Emily's face. Sam lost control during a transformation. The shift into a wolf is violent, physically overwhelming, and hard to contain when emotions run high. In that moment of uncontrolled transformation, he injured her badly enough to leave permanent scarring. Emily stayed. The pack normalized it as a tragic accident, an unavoidable hazard of the life they lead. Not something requiring accountability or serious examination of whether the relationship was safe, just the cost of loving a wolf. The wolf pack is a system that teaches its members that biological impulse overrides personal choice. That imprinting is beautiful fate, not a mechanism that causes damage to everyone it touches. That the loss of control that comes with transformation is a risk others should absorb. Jacob absorbs all of this. He learned, from the culture of the pack, that his impulses carry a kind of legitimacy that her boundaries don't. The Cullens and the wolf pack look nothing alike. One is a family of composed, wealthy vampires in a glass house in the forest. The other is a group of young men from the reservation, bound together by transformation and tribal history. But both systems produce the same result: men who relate to Bella as though her autonomy is secondary to their feelings about her. The Cullens teach that control exercised from love is still love, that monitoring, deciding for, and limiting someone is care if the intentions are good. The wolf pack teaches that biological destiny matters more than consent, that when instinct speaks, choice becomes irrelevant. The real question the franchise never asks: what would Bella's story look like if the systems around her had taught the men in it that her autonomy mattered as much as their love? We've looked at the whole franchise. Edward as an obsessive controller whose behavior is normalized by beauty and wealth. Jacob with his emotional pressure, non-consensual kiss, and imprinting on a newborn as though it were destiny. Bella not a complicit participant, but a 17-year-old left without neutral adult support, without access to unbiased information, and surrounded by people who all wanted something from her. And two family systems that teach the men around her that control is love and instinct is more important than consent. In 2008, this was the ultimate teenage fantasy: dangerous but pure love, an eternal boy who would die for you, a choice between two perfect options. Everything was packaged in beauty, music, and the feeling of being special. Nobody talked about consent, about red flags, about what "I can't live without you" actually means when said by someone who watches you sleep. In 2026, the franchise reads as a warning story, not because it's badly made or because the people who loved it were wrong to love it, but because it shows, with remarkable accuracy, how controlling relationships begin and develop, and how effectively they can be made to look like the greatest love in the world. And how a young person without support, without language for what's happening, and without a single disinterested adult in their corner is not equipped to see it. Real love is not "I cannot live without you." It is "I want you to live fully, even if that life is without me." It is equality, respect for boundaries, support for growth, not "you have to choose me or I'll fall apart." Twilight is not a fairy tale. It is a lesson. If someone requires you to change, lose your friends, give up yourself, that is not love. That is control. And it matters to be able to see the difference, even when everything looks perfect on screen.